So a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Kishore Chatterjee. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Electrical Engineering over here. And currently, I'm also the head of this department. So on behalf of the E fraternity, I welcome Mr. Sharad Sanghi to this event of fireside chat, which is being organized by the Electrical Engineering Alumni and Corporate Relations Office. So this is EESER office is an activity of especially of our department, to connect with our alumni as well as the corporates, so that we can have a close relationship between the department with our alumni as well as corporates. And so this EESER office work as a subset of our alumni and corporate relations office, the Dean of the Alumni and Corporate Relations Office of the Institute. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Sharad Sanghi. Professor Sharayu will give a formal introduction about Mr. Sanghi, but I can't stop mentioning that Sharad is a distinguished alumnus of our institute, and he graduated in 1989. So I'd like to just inform you, Sharad, that in the last 10-15 years, the complexion of the department has changed, and the change that has happened is that 15 years back, we used to have very few PhD students of the order of 30, 40 students. But now, if you see the total strength of our student strength is 1,300, out of which 600 are BTechs and dual degree students, that means of the BTech undergraduate students, and 700 are postgraduate students. And out of the 700 students, 400 are PhD students and 300 are MTech students. So therefore, you can see that there is a huge change so far as our PhD population in the department is concerned. So this has happened across the whole other departments in the IT. So the thing is that, as you can see, that from being an educational institute providing undergraduate education, high-end undergraduate education in the past, now we have changed our complexion to almost to a postgraduate institute, and at the same time we are keeping the same. We are teaching the undergraduates the same rigor. So you can see that there is a sea change that has taken the complexion of our department, and in the process, our research output has increased. But then, of late, what we are thinking, and in the direction that we are doing cutting-edge research, but at the same time, we strongly feel that our research should have some immediate impact so far as the society at large is concerned, or the industry they are there in so far as India is concerned. So towards that end, we require people like you to come to help us, to guide us, so that we can meaningfully get attached to the industry, and so far as and the social milieu on the or the ecosystem of the Indian industry, so far as Indian industry is concerned. So we require your guidance, help, so that our faculty members as well as our students can get connected with you. So this is just a beginning. I think we will keep on engaged in other activities as well. So I'm looking forward towards that end. With this, I will hand over the proceedings to Professor Sharayu Mohari.
Thanks, Casey. So I'll welcome Mr. Sharad Sanghi. I'll give a brief introduction and then maybe have you tell us about your journey so far. So Mr. Sharad Sanghi graduated from the department in 1989 and went on to do his master's from Columbia University. He founded NetMagic in July 1998, which is now an entity company. NetMagic is India's leading managed hosting and cloud services provider with over 1,000 employees and 9 data centers, delivering services to over 1,500 enterprise customers across the globe. Mr. Sanghi is a pioneer in the Indian cloud computing space and has been felicitated with the Indus Entrepreneur Mumbai's Hall of Fame. He has also been featured on the top 25 Indian tech business persons who have completed 25 years of service by the Economic Times and conferred with the Udyog Ratan Award by the Institute of Economic Studies. As Professor Casey mentioned, he was awarded the Distinguished Alumnus Award by IIT Bombay this year in 2021 for his contributions towards the field of electrical engineering. With that, I want to again welcome Mr. Sharat Sanghi, and we've collected a few questions from the students. And a few from our side. I'll start with a very basic one where I would request Mr. Sharat Sanghi to tell us a little bit about his company and its trajectory and maybe some future plans.
First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Chatterjee, Sharayu, and the entire electrical engineering department. My friend Rajesh, who's professor now, who was my classmate, to get me connected. And sir, I will certainly strive to work to connect at least our industry with IIT Bombay. In fact, on Friday, I'm meeting the director in that regard. Friday at 10:30. Another hostel mate of mine is now heading the alumni relationships, Ravi Shankar. I was in room 104, he was in room 105. So he's a very dear friend, and through his efforts, I'm actually meeting the director on Friday. And if you're in the campus, would love to connect with you tomorrow as well. So back to the fireside chat. Sharayu, to answer your question, I founded NetMagic in '98. It's India's leading data center services provider. We have almost 2 million square foot in operation, with 10 data centers across the country, over 3,000 clients now. And we are, in terms of our plans going forward, we're looking to more than double our capacity. So we are building 6 large data centers in 4 cities, 3 in the Mumbai metropolitan region, and in Noida, Chennai, and Bangalore. But we are not doing this. Data centers consume a lot of power. We are mindful of that. We do believe that despite that, data centers are essential, because if these requirements were spread out all over the in customer data centers, then the energy efficiency or the energy wasted would be a lot more. But we're doing sustainable development, so we are setting up captive solar plants, captive hybrid wind solar plants in Maharashtra and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, as well as in Noida. And in addition to that, after Entity acquired us in majority stake in 2012, and now we have a whole suite of IT services. So in addition to data center cloud, we also have all the required network licenses to provide domestic and international long distance connectivity. So we provide a full stack service to enterprises who want connectivity, who want hosting, or IT infrastructure management, including data backup, disaster recovery, security, and all these allied services. So that's roughly about our company and about our expansion plans. We do now plan to launch what we call as edge computing or edge data centers in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, because currently we are only located in the major metros. But with especially for high bandwidth requirements, we have clients who are the OTT players, and also with 5G coming in, there would be a lot of low latency requirements, and to avoid buffering when you watch, for example, Amazon Prime. We want to just an example, but we want to set up data centers in tier 2, tier 3 cities as well across the country.
Okay. So I had a couple of questions about what you mentioned. Do you have specific sort of energy targets in transiting from maybe traditional energy sources to solar, wind?
Yes, absolutely. Entity is announced, and so now we are part of Entity, and Entity as an organization has now announced a 10x reduction, and now for the data center division actually announced net carbon neutrality by the year 2030. So currently we are around roughly around 50% of our power is really through renewable sources. So the way it works is we set up wind farms and solar farms in the same state as our data center, wheel that power into the grid, and then get the benefit from the utility.
Right.
And so currently we are roughly getting around 50% of our capacity through renewable energy. But the aim is in the next 2 years to make it closer to 80%, and by 2030 to make it 100% net carbon neutral. So if you have to buy certificates, we'll buy certificates. But this is one area, I know you're going to ask me about how we can collaborate later, but this is one area that I would love to work with IIT Bombay in. um, to see how we can expedite that process. Yeah.
Right. So this 50% number you mentioned is the Indian part of entity or overall?
Oh, no, Indian part. In fact, we are ahead of the rest of the entity, most of the other part of entity. There's, I think, one of the countries is roughly in the same line as us, but most of the other countries are just starting this right now. But the goals were set earlier this year, and we have to make ourselves carbon neutral. And it's not only what the entity says, it's even the clients that we have. They're insisting on carbon neutral. So if there are two service providers, one of them provides higher renewable energy source as powering them, then they would prefer to choose them. So it's now become a norm even from our clients.
Got it. Okay. I'll move on to the second question. The second question is, what do you consider your strengths and limitations, and how have they served you in your journey of being a successful businessman?
Okay. I think it's difficult to say. I'll start with the limitation first. I think one of the things is I'm a little soft. So sometimes when you have to take tough calls, I've not been able to take them. And sometimes the tough calls are required for the benefit of the organization. For example, if somebody is not performing to their level of expected performance, I think I don't have the guts to tell the person to leave that easily. And sometimes it just takes very long, right? Sometimes you need to make some change. So I think, and that may be because I think from the heart as opposed from the, most business people think from the brain. I think that there's no right or wrong answer. I think it should be a combination. And I think that's one area, that's one limitation I certainly see. I don't know if it's a strength or not, but definitely ethics, transparency towards all stakeholders, are values that I certainly try to adhere to. And, I think overall empathy towards all stakeholders, right? So, put yourself in their shoes and see how you would. So, for example, if when it comes to clients, I wouldn't want, if I'm buying service from someone and if there's an issue, I should be able to reach out to someone and get it addressed right away, right? So obviously you want to be proactive and prevent issues, but in the event there is an issue, so those are the kind of things, from a client perspective, we make sure that client never feels that, they're stuck with us, and they have the choice of either moving out of our services or even, and we addressing their services on time. When it comes to investors, stakeholders, transparency, the way we would want to be, what we would like on the other side, we would like to do the same with all our stakeholders. So I think empathy is a very key value that I cherish and try to keep in mind all the time. And I think those are I think even looking at the positive side, setting goals, and working towards a certain goal, looking at, a lot of people have strengths. Some people everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Looking at the strengths and leveraging people's strengths as opposed to finding fault with someone saying that you didn't do this or something like that. Those are some of the things that I look at in day-to-day life. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Could you talk a little bit about experiences that you went through as a student that have played a pivotal role in your path after that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I must first of all mention about Professor Narayana. So he had one of the things that left a deep impact, when we were graduating, or maybe in the final year when we had to apply, I wasn't sure whether to apply for going abroad or not. And I always wanted to do something in India, and mainly because I wanted to be with my parents when they age. But at the same time, everybody else was going abroad, so I was in this dilemma. So one of the feedbacks he gave me was, do go abroad, explore it, but come back, right? And that's what I did. So I still remember those words. I think some of the other experiences as a student, I think teamwork, played a lot of sports. And so, team, and we organized, got involved in organization of, certain activities of Moving Indigo and a few other activities as well, cultural activities. So I think it gave me this, taught me teamwork, taught me how to organize, take initiative. Um, you know, obviously you had a lot of, you had to complete deadlines. So, adhering to deadlines, discipline in ensuring that you complete what you have to do in the requisite amount of time. I think quizzes and Vivas taught you to think on the fly, right? So a lot of these things actually played a very important role in shaping up, shaping my career and what I am today.
From personal curiosity, really, was it an easy decision for you to come back? I know a lot of people who go in with the intention of coming back, but it's sometimes hard to execute.
No, it was, it did. So I wanted to come back earlier than I did, but it wasn't a difficult decision to come back at all. It is just the matter of time. So in my case, what happened was I was fortunate to work for the NSFNet backbone. So I was picked up from Columbia to work on the NSFNet backbone. And I was just waiting for commercial internet to happen, which happened in 1995, and it opened up to private players in 1998. So I think I was just waiting for some, some impetus or some event that would speed up my decision to come back. And that happened when I think the Vajpayee government announced in 95 that they would make commercial internet available. So that was, that kind of prompted me to move back to India. So because I knew that now the market would open up for me to do something on my own in India.
Hi, we are all here and we're listening to you. It's very nice to hear you. And I'm actually quite curious about, all the answers that you've given. And while Sharayu comes back, if you don't mind, this is again out of personal curiosity. Can you, like you said, when you were waiting for things to become better in your decision to come back and you notice this opportunity, do you think there are a lot of alums who continue to notice such opportunities and are looking to come back?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I think so. I think at least I can't speak for others, but I know that people have come back since then. I think in the early 90s it was rarer, but now there are so many more opportunities that are available. All the top companies, whether it's Google or Amazon or any of the top FANG companies or other companies, have got R&D backends in India, and so there are a lot more opportunities for alums to come back. Now, I think in the early 90s or mid 90s, there were lesser opportunities at that time, but I think there were more entrepreneurial opportunities. Now also there are a lot of, you see the kind of IPOs that are happening today, right? So there are, I think India has a lot of opportunities to offer. So whether it's entrepreneurship or jobs, I think the overall infrastructure has improved a lot of more opportunities. Look at the research opportunities at IIT. A professor was saying that now we have 600 PhD students. So there are definitely a lot more opportunities now, and I hope that many more alums would come back. Yeah.
I'll move on to the next question. This has more to do with R&D. How crucial is R&D to your organization and the industry in general? You touched upon on one aspect of it, which is going green, but there must be other aspects that also require research.
No, absolutely. And so we have, 16. We have 2 development centers. I wouldn't exactly. It's not fundamental research. We don't do fundamental research, but we do. NTT as an organization has fundamental research happening in Japan and Silicon Valley. I think ours is more like development. So we identify a problem and then do some development. So we have a team of dedicated engineers, about 60 of them, based in Pune and Mumbai, 14 Pune and about 20 in Mumbai, that are just focused on coming out with new offerings to our clients, doing automation. So for example, we have a multi-cloud management platform that can provide a common single pane of glass across cloud instances from Amazon, Google, Azure, or co-located with us. We've introduced AI in operations, right? So that we can do predictive. We can predict when failures might happen. We can do event correlation. We've done the similar thing in the managed detection and response security platform. But that's not. I wouldn't call it fundamental research. I think that would require a lot more investment. And I think NTT does it in two places in the world. One is in Japan and one is in Silicon Valley. Having said that, so it is very important because you can at least, that's how you differentiate from competition. You can come out with newer services and newer product offerings that competition doesn't have. So I think amongst all our peers, but now we have to compete with global players, right? So now the competition is not just with Indian players. Now you have the likes of Equinix, Digital Realty, and on the cloud side, you have Amazon, Google, Azure. So while you compete, while you collaborate, you also compete with them. And so a lot more is required. And I think this is one area. So both on the IT side, on the IT services side, on cybersecurity and data protection, we have engineers dedicated to coming out with innovations in those areas. But but also in the M&E side, mechanical and electrical side, for building more energy efficient data centers. I think one area where we can collaborate with IIT Bombay would be in the mechanical and electrical side, on how to improve our energy efficiency, looking at more resilient electrical designs, looking at even efficiency of our solar plants that we set up. And so there are many such areas that we can engage with IIT Bombay. There's another issue where, we have some of our infrastructure makes a lot of noise. So we want to do acoustic suppression. We're already working with Professor Manik in IIT Bombay, I think, I think, I'm not sure which department, whether it's in W or not, but we are working with him to come out with solutions for that. But there are many such challenges that we since we can't do fundamental research, we would love to leverage IIT Bombay in some of these areas.
Are there challenges that are unique to India that are probably not a priority for NTT as a global presence?
Fortunately, it's mostly to do with regulations. Fortunately, the regulations in our space have not, it's just ease of doing business, which is a little bit of a challenge in India. So with all due respect of which government, whether it's the Congress government or BJP government or whoever comes, they all claim to make doing business better. Maybe to some they have, but there's a lot more to be done. So it takes a lot of time to get approvals when you want to construct new data centers, when you want to set up new solar plants and things like that. The approval process is very long. So I don't think some of these issues NTT faces in other parts of the world. Other than that, I think the IT sector is relatively, NTT is the parent company of Docomo, which had to exit India because of the 2G issues. So they've had their fair share of challenges. But in the IT sector that we play in, we're not really a telecom player, we're more an IT player. I don't think there's too many regulations. They are talking about regulating cloud, which I shudder to think what will happen if they do that. They are talking about data privacy and protection, but they've from whatever we understand, they watered it down. At one point, they wanted to have a criminal offense in case there was some breach of data. Then they wanted to put the owner of the companies in jail and things like that. So I think they watered that down. So those are some things that are unique to India. Like there is GDPR in Europe, where there's only a financial penalty. It's not a criminal liability. So, but I think overall, I think there's, because you have global companies like Amazon, Google also setting up data centers and also in a similar area, I think there's enough lobbying happening to prevent those kind of issues. But other than that, and of course, there are power availability is an issue in certain parts. In Bombay, there's no issue in power availability, but in many parts of the country, you don't get stable and power. You lose power. In all the other cities that we operate in, we lose power at least twice a week. So these are some things that are new. But then there are pluses. We get incentives for doing renewable energy. In some parts of the world, you have to pay more to do renewable energy. And so there are some. There is Data Protection Act is also talking about forcing data sovereignty. We didn't lobby for that, but it helps our business. So it comes both sides. So there's some uniquenesses that are not so good and some things that are actually good for us.
Right, that makes sense. One of our motivations for the alumni and corporate cell at the department was to increase the academia industry interaction from the level at which it is right now. And talking to alumni like yourself helps us a lot because you can sort of bridge the gap between academia and industry. So in that spirit, I wanted to ask you, what we can do proactively to contribute to industrial R&D or to engage with more companies?
So I think it's a lot of times I think companies reach out to you when they have a problem to solve. But I think proactively, as you rightly said, one thing I could think of is maybe you can have a dedicated somebody taking care of business development, so building awareness, the marketing function will in corporate terms, somebody ensuring that the industry is aware of what kind of research and what kind of research that IIT Bombay, for example, is doing, and what are some of the areas that collaboration, definitely industry university collaboration is the key. And I know IIT Bombay does a lot, but I think it seems to be more when somebody has a problem, they come to IIT Bombay, as opposed to IIT Bombay necessarily building awareness, reaching out. I think I was talking to you earlier, and you mentioned that there were some events that you've actually done that, but possibly didn't get the right stakeholders attending those events. So I think maybe organizing. Maybe I think one way would be to reach out through alumni and get together. There are some organizations that are attended by CEOs, right, or decision makers. So for whether it's there are many for example, even CII and other organizations that you could probably reach out to. And so organizations where the key stakeholders are present. There are some industry associations like like you have the Cellular Operators Association, or the Internet Service Provider Association, or the Mobile Operators Association, etc. I mean, I'm just giving examples where there are more focused bodies where for a particular solution you could probably reach out to. But I think you need to have more awareness and and maybe dedicated business development function within the campus, just like you have an alumni function. Similarly, maybe I wouldn't call it business, but more like an academia private collaboration function, if you will. But I think alumni is one of the best ways to reach out, because there is already alumni keen to give back and work and know how good IIT Bombay is. So I think alumni is probably the one of the best ways to reach out.
Right. Next question is also along similar lines. Oftentimes there are technologies that are ready in the lab at the lab level, but the next step, which would be commercialization, is something that is often desired but doesn't come to fruition. So do you have any thoughts on how the department or the EE community can tap opportunities for technology commercialization, maybe within the academic environment or even with collaborating through the industry?
So I think IIT Bombay is already doing some incubation, and there are some initiatives that IIT Bombay is doing. I'm not sure how successful they are, but I think I can answer from a industry collaboration perspective. I think once you have some technology that you've kind of you made either a discovery or you've come up with some findings, then the first step would be to prototype it. And I think that's one area where industries can collaborate to get the prototype done, and then you can license it. If the prototyping is successful, then obviously it can be licensed not only to the company that helped you to do the prototype, but maybe to a larger. Maybe they can get a slight exclusive period, or maybe get better licensing terms, and then others could also be it could be licensed to others as well. But again, I think it boils down to awareness. It boils down to how do you reach out to industry so that industry is aware of what are these new areas that you've come out with. So for example, I mentioned that we are interested in something in the renewable energy space, improving energy efficiency, resilient designs. Of course, there are other areas. I believe there was some professor in IIT Bombay who had reached out, who did some work in routing, building low-cost routers and things like that. So that could be another area on the IT side. So some of these, we are not sure how. I mean, we interacted recently, and so I was aware that this is what you're doing in IIT Bombay, but some of it, can be done more proactively. And if maybe have. I think you mentioned once you had a industry day where you got some people from the industry to participate. Maybe reaching out to alumni like us, also where you can showcase some of the research that you're doing could help us in taking that forward. So again, it's a matter of awareness and reaching out to the industry. I think that should be both ways. I think industries also need to reach out, but IIT can also reach out to industries. And maybe the easier path could be through alumni and certain associations that we can discuss. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. We did have an industrial day, I think 3 years ago. It's something we look forward to doing again.
Yeah, maybe we can do it more frequently. Yeah.
Yes. I think the pandemic has set everything back by a couple of years, but yeah, hopefully soon. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a detour from talking about technical skills, and I wanted to ask you about some soft skills that you think are crucial for professional success, and especially those that maybe the IIT environment doesn't really help foster.
I'm not sure that I could say that IIT environment necessarily doesn't foster. But I think, again, things like empathy, I would put empathy on the top of the list, just communication. And I think there is enough that you can learn even in the IIT environment in these areas. I think being a patient listener. So very often, you're very busy all the time, and, sometimes you don't listen to people properly. So I think being patience and listening to people is important. I think adaptability, because you have lots of challenges in business, and being able to adapt to various challenges is very important. Teamwork, again, which I learned from IIT Bombay as well. Interpersonal skills. I think ability to solve problems. Again, that you learn from IIT Bombay. So I wouldn't quite say that some of these soft skills you don't learn from IIT, but I think if you are really observant, you can learn all of this from college as well. So yeah, these are some of the soft skills that are important. I think ethics is also very important. So yeah, these are some of the soft skills that I try to follow, and they've helped me in my journey so far.
Were there specific extracurricular or co-curricular activities you did at IIT Bombay that helped with some of these things?
Yeah, so mainly sports. There was in the first year some cultural activities, mainly sports, cricket, soccer, table tennis. I was in NSO sports, and then also I was involved in organizing mostly fundraising for Mood Indigo for a couple of years. Yeah, so those are the ones that I remember.
Got it. As you know, we have a school of management here at IIT Bombay, and as a part of it, we do offer minors in entrepreneurship for engineering students. And a lot of students do take up that minor, especially those who have entrepreneurship skills or want to become entrepreneurs in later life. What I wanted to ask you is if you think there are specific aspects of entrepreneurship that can be successfully taught in a classroom setting. I understand that a lot of people probably won't learn on this part.
That's a great question, Sharayu. I personally feel that a lot can be taught, but I don't think you can necessarily determine whether the entrepreneur in question will succeed or not based on what he's learned in school, or he or she has learned in school. But I think a lot can be helped. Like, for example, what are the elements of a business plan? What are the various funding options that people have? What do investors look at in funding a company? How do you do customer development, right? How do you do product management, customer development? All these are skills that can be taught, right? But I don't think a success or failure would determine, because those require things like passion. They require things like self-belief. I remember when we were starting the company, first, in India, nobody was willing to fund us. It took somebody who's my mentor now, Mr. B.V. Jagdish, who was the co-founder of Exodus Communications. He was from VJTI Mumbai, but settled in the valley. And then he decided to fund us, and then we had a lot of investors coming to fund us. So success or failure would depend. In 2001, there was a dot-com crash. We didn't know whether we'll have enough money to pay salaries, right? But just the self-belief, the sheer passion. I've seen so many entrepreneurs or want-to-be entrepreneurs start off with something and then just giving up because they don't have the self-belief or passion. So that you can't teach in a entrepreneurship school. You can say, okay, that is required, but end of the day, right? And I don't blame them. It could be their personal situation that they can't go beyond a certain amount. They can't stretch beyond a certain, they have families to support, etc. So I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but some of these you can't teach. In my opinion, you can't teach, and success or failure would depend on the entrepreneur or the team in question. But certainly things like, how do you make a good business plan? How do you, what are the things that investors look at, right? For example, investors look at teams of people, they back the entrepreneur, they look at barriers to entry, right? So what is your barrier to entry and things like that. Those are things that can be taught, right? But I think end of the day, success would depend on passion and self-belief. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I'll now open the floor for the audience. If you have any questions, maybe you can raise your hand and go ahead and ask it.
Hello, I'm Srilagna. So it's like we are seeing that COVID, due to pandemic, we all are suffering. So I have a question like, how do you see the effect of pandemic and this lockdown affect the IT sector of the India and world? So what about the job market and all?
Yeah, so great question. So let me answer that in multiple factors that you've raised. So first of all, for the IT sector per se, pandemic wasn't necessarily so bad, because actually, we are doing this conference on Zoom, and so basically, in our case, we saw an increase in cloud sales. We saw an increase in bandwidth consumptions. We saw an increase in data center utilization. So from an IT sector per se, it was not necessarily bad, because more and more people started. I think it accelerated digital transformation like no other phenomena, right? So people were forced to do it, and people did it pretty well. But yes, from a jobs perspective, I think the first wave, people were worried, but now the hiring is back. In fact, right now the biggest problem, I don't know if you've heard of the Great Resignation. 41% of the people worldwide are looking at changing their jobs, and that's the biggest challenge we are all facing right now, is just making sure that people, when you want to grow and you want to hire new people, they have 5 offers, and the rate of backouts after accepting an offer is almost as high as 33%. So I think the job market is pretty hot right now. People are hiring full steam. This is not only in India but across the world. Yes, there was a slowdown in jobs. People actually started laying off people in the first wave because of the fear of the unknown. They didn't know how long this would last. They didn't know what impact it would cause to their businesses. In some cases, people didn't do salary increments. In some people did cost control, and they actually did salary pay cuts. But actually now, with after the vaccination, I would say the fear is kind of over. It's not as it was. I wouldn't say it's completely gone, but it's to a large extent reduced. Maybe if there's another outbreak, things could change again. But as of now, the job market is hot, and the IT business actually did pretty well in the pandemic.
Sir, just an extension to this, the previous one, like how NetMagic helped its surrounding to fight COVID, just for a curiosity.
Oh, sure. Great question. So we did, NetMagic and Entity did multiple measures. So first of all, let me talk about, we are an essential services company. So we were classified as essential services. So first of all, I'll talk about how we took care of our own employees, and then I'll talk about surroundings and other things. So as far as our own employees were concerned, we first of all, we were one of the first companies to make sure that we announced work from home 1 week before the lockdown. I remember I think lockdown was announced March 16th, and we had people working from home on March 19th. Most of our people anyway had laptops. The ones who didn't, we got them laptops before there was a shortage of laptops. And anyway, we used to use VPNs to secure VPNs to access workplace from home in any case. So it was not so difficult for us to do that. We made sure that all our essential services staff that had to operate our data centers throughout the pandemic, we hired a whole bunch of private vehicles. We hired hotel rooms near all our facilities, so that if they didn't want to commute, they could just stay in a nearby hotel and walk to work. And of course, then later on, we organized vaccination camps, not only for our staff, but also for all the contract staff, whether there was a housekeeping staff, whether it was we had a new, the only thing that impacted us in the pandemic was our construction of new data center buildings got delayed. But we took care of making sure that all the construction laborers who were building our data centers were vaccinated twice, so that they don't, and of course made sure that there was hygienic conditions for them to work when work was allowed to happen. In addition to that, NTT announced a $3 million contribution, out of which 2 million came from overseas and 1 million we contributed in India. We did that for the main cause for that was to promote vaccination in rural villages, and the villages, the rural areas that we selected were close to where our data centers are. So in the MMR villages around MMR villages around Karnataka and the like, so close to where we are. So these were just some measures that we took to ensure. Of course, there were other measures to, whenever anybody came to our data center, we made sure there was enough social distancing. There was, proper temperature checks, etc. All the standard measures that everybody takes, those we took anyway. But these were some of the measures that we took for not only helping our employees to do their work. So we operated throughout. We didn't have a single day where any of our data centers were shut. They were running round the clock with staff throughout. Maybe at 10-20% of our workforce, but they ran throughout the pandemics.
Nikhil, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So Sanghi, I think so. You did briefly talk about the initial days of NetMagic, but I was I was curious about. I was wondering if you can elaborate on what the initial idea was behind the company, and what in the context of the networking landscape. Then I don't think there were any clouds or data centers at that time. And how that the company direction has evolved over time.
Great question. I normally cover it, but I didn't go through the entire journey, so I'll definitely answer that. So when I came back from the US, as I mentioned, when commercial internet was announced, I knew that since I was a backbone engineer, I used to run the NSFNet backbone, which was the first large backbone of the internet. My intent was to do something in that space. So from 95 to 98, while commercial internet was allowed, it was only allowed to be done. There was a monopoly of BSNL, Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited, and no private player could offer commercial internet. So I became a consultant to BSNL. In 98, when they announced private ISPs, I wanted to set up something again, and I'll tell you where the idea came from. But I didn't have the capital to do that. What I noticed, so I started consulting for some of the private ISPs who are now my competition. So whether it was Tata Communications, whether it was SIFI, whether it was other players in the market, I was helping setting up their networks. Hathway Cable, which is now Reliance. I was basically a technical consultant setting up their infrastructure, and then when 98, when I had written a business plan that Mr. B.V. Jagdish of Exodus Communications liked. And the plan that I did was, when I saw all this consulting I was doing, everybody was focusing only on dial-up subscribers. Everybody was focusing on, what we now call as broadband, consumers. So consumer internet was what the focus of everyone was, because that time valuations were based on number of eyeballs or number of subscribers. The opportunity that I spotted was that nobody's focusing on mission critical businesses. And so the business plan I wrote was, how can you leverage the internet for helping mission critical businesses? And of course, I was exposed to data centers in the US, so data center was a key element. There were a few other services I planned which didn't kind of pan out, and so we didn't go ahead with those, but I focused on data centers. Cloud came in much later. So the true inventor of cloud technology was Amazon. They used this infrastructure, the automation that they'd done for their own retail. They used that as AWS, I think in 2003 or 2004. And we adopted cloud in India in around 2008, 2009. So it was almost 4-5 years after they did it. So cloud came much later. So in terms of evolution, 2001, it's actually necessity is the mother of invention, as they all say. In 2001, when there was a dot-com bust, we didn't, as I said, we didn't know if we could pay salaries. So a lot of the customers that we had could not pay their bills. And so we knew fundamentally that the business model is strong. So we focused on, whatever enterprise customers or corporate clients we had, we said, what else can we provide them? We don't have access to capital to build more data centers, but maybe we can provide them value-added services. So we started offering, we were the first to offer infrastructure management services within the data center. We were the first to offer security services, data protection services, and that's how we, became profitable. And then in around 2006, 2007 is when people realized that this is actually a viable business, and and data centers started becoming in vogue again. And that's when a lot of venture capital actually approached us to fund our growth. The way now the evolution is, we are looking at, as I said, edge computing. We're looking at how can we do multi-cloud, and really for enterprise clients, which is our key focus, it's more hybrid multi-cloud, because not everything is on cloud, and I think it'll take a while before everything moves to the cloud. We're looking at private 5G, the 5G technology within campuses. So many new areas that we are just evolving with the times. Artificial intelligence in our operations and our security operations, as well as in our managed services operations. So that's how we are evolving.
I see. Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah.
You mentioned edge resources are something you're investing in heavily.
Yeah.
Video on demand seems like a natural group of people who would be interested in it. Are there other applications where edge resources? I mean, I can foresee virtual reality, augmented reality, but I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, no, even people are talking of doing surgeries, remotely and things like that. So, medical applications, but I think those are not yet quite there, but they will come in. Not many edge platforms have been successful even in the Western countries, but it's only a matter of time. I think the video on demand is probably the low-hanging fruit, as you rightly said. So streaming services, and there are many. There's content distribution in general, heavy content distribution. So we are talking to clients like Akamai, etc. We're talking to all the hyperscalers like Google, Amazon, Azure, and then Netflix. Many OTT players in India. So that's what we are starting with. Of course, there are some local hosters that also need space locally, and the local businesses that need space locally. But I think eventually there will be, with 5G coming in, with AR, VR becoming more in vogue in the future, I think those will be applications that we will serve from some of these edge locations. But again, the thing is, today what looks distant, right? If we don't act now, we will be left behind. So when we started our first data center, first large data center, when we built a 250,000 square foot data center in Chandivali, which is very close to IIT Bombay, we didn't think that we could sell it. We didn't know how many years it would take to sell it. Today, we build a 3 lakh square foot data center, and it is sold before it is built. So it's just amazing how things change. And so, and of course, tomorrow with quantum computing and some new change in technology, again, you may not need that kind of space. I don't know. But as of now, whatever we build is not enough. And therefore, there's suddenly a spate of data center players that are entering the market. And so there's huge competition in this space.
Yeah. Right. Just ballpark, do you define edge that is within, say, a few hundred kilometers or even closer than that?
No specific definition. Wherever we feel that it's distant enough from it's a fiber distance that counts and not the physical distance. So sometimes the fiber distance could be even more than the physical distance, and wherever latency becomes an issue. And so what we are doing is we are starting. So what we've done is, with some of our clients, we've looked at their traffic flows, and we've identified areas outside of our main areas of operation where we see a significant amount of traffic originating. And there we've so for example, cities like Jaipur, Chandigarh, Lucknow in the north, and maybe Ahmedabad and a few other cities in Pune already has a lot of core data centers, so I don't know if there's much room for an edge location there. There are already many players who have large data centers in Pune and Hyderabad. But we've looked at traffic patterns. So we're not going to blindly build. We're going to look at where the traffic is So through the source IP address, source destination IP address traffic flows, we have figured out which are some of the locations that need to be addressed. So to prevent buffering, for example, on a streaming video, and that's how we'll start. And then we are pretty confident that something else will come up, some application like AR, VR, or something else will come up.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for answering all our questions. Casey, maybe you can take it over with some big remarks.
So before we close, so I have one question for you, Sharad. So it is heartening to note that you mentioned that empathy is one of the soft skills that one should acquire. So do you think that empathy can be inculcated through a curriculum kind of thing? And if you think so, how one should go about it?
That's a good question. I think I'm sure the awareness of empathy can be done. I think people can be. I don't know. I know that in design. In the design school, like for example, Stanford Design School, empathy is a key element of the design school, because if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's going to use your product, right, in product design, then you'll design a better product. So I know that empathy is one of the values. So I think in everything that we build, right, whenever we're teaching anything which requires us to build something, I think that can be mentioned. If not, I don't think you need to do a specific course on empathy, but I think you can bring in empathy in everything that we do. So I know for a fact that in product design, empathy is one of the key reasons. My daughter went to Stanford, and she's told me that in their design school, that's one of the key they actually emphasize on empathy. Okay, so I think you can bring it in different elements of whatever we teach today. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharad, for spending time with us, and we expect more of your time to spend physically in our department in person.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for sparing your valuable time with us. We'll get in touch with you.
Yeah.
And we'll keep bugging you.
No, not at all, sir. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me a chance. And I'll be in the campus tomorrow meeting the director.
Yeah,
so
sure. I'll try.
I don't mind coming a little early if any of you are available.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Rajesh would like to talk to you.
Yeah. No. I just wanted to say hello. Yeah. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Rajesh is an inspiration to all of us. We want to, if I can do even 1/10 of the impact that he's created, I'll be very happy. So one of the things that I didn't mention is the purpose of doing business is to create impact. So for example, in NetMagic, we believe we help the digital infrastructure of the country. Maybe now look at securing the infrastructure. Sustenance is another area of impact. But I think education, the impact that education has, that all of you are doing, I don't think anybody can beat that. So thank you, sir.
Okay, that's great.
If I may ask one question.
Sure, Rajesh.
Kishore, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Sharad, one of the things that I would like you to advise our students is, you're a professional. So what would be great advice to our students is, how do you become a professional?
Okay. I don't think there was any specific. So I think my US work experience helped a lot, very honestly. I know, Rajesh, you worked in the US, and it's very different. And I think India has changed. So India has become like that now. But earlier in in India, I remember earlier, when I did an internship before I went abroad, you had to, it was very hierarchical in nature, and there was not open communication and open discussion with your bosses, for example. So I think what I'm working in the US for 5-6 years actually helped me get that professionalism, if you will, there. And I think it just comes with experience. But I would urge the students not to worry. I know there's a lot of there's post-graduation anxiety that people go through, and I think IIT trains us well enough that we can take on any challenge in the world. And so I don't think I think with experience, it just comes with experience.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sharad.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay. So let us conclude this session, but our association will continue.
Of course, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to the audience for the live questions as well as interesting questions that they have posed.
Thank you, Sharayu. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.